This month of news was made possible by 470 supporters and by our proud sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Make no mistake, this is the biggest month of news since this series began, and demonstrates so perfectly how a pandemic is able to restructure every fabric of society so quickly. Viewers who wanted an escape from corona will have to look elsewhere, because either directly or indirectly, it seems as if every scrap of news from every corner of the world is in some roundabout way related to this invisible and disruptive force of nature. This is the month that flipped the world on its head. As a disclaimer, the state of affairs around the world has been moving at a blistering pace, and as a result, the last few days of activity won't be reported, simply due to the time needed for editing. With this in mind, let's get started. As of time of writing, on the 24th of March, coronavirus cases have risen to 382,000, with 16,500 deaths. The current mortality rate for all demographics is currently sitting at around 4%, which has been significantly higher than the 1% average for seasonal flu. The virus unfortunately has a much higher 10% mortality rate for those over 70. As it currently stands, China has been overtaken by the United States in terms of total cases. However, Italy, not to be outdone, has been vying for the number one spot on the podium. The abnormally high rate for such a comparatively small nation has been partly attributed to an older average population, a high rate of smoking, and what we'll call much warmer greeting practices. Nations that top the charts in having the most amount of cases also include France, Spain, Germany, and Iran. South Korea, on the other hand, which was coming second this time a month ago, has had far more successful management of the virus, with the country at one point going an entire day without a single new reported case. This was attributed to the nation's nationalized health system, as well as its previous experience with dealing with similar outbreaks. The United States has so far led the world in cases among the younger population, which has partly been attributed to the unconcerned mentality of those within the country, which has been amplified due to the closure of educational institutions nationwide. The United States later banned all travel from China and Europe, before enacting a mandatory closure of all non-essential businesses, in an effort to slow the spread. The general practice of closed borders and the cessation of non-essential businesses has been widely adopted by most countries around the globe, in varying degrees of severity, which has led to many employees, especially working on an hourly wage, to be suspended or let go completely. Some experts have predicted that this may lead to a frightening unemployment rate in the US of up to 30%. However, this remains purely speculative. The virus has also seen a significant impact on the stock market, with the Dow Jones falling the most in one day in its entire 135-year history. As someone who studied business for 4.5 years, I didn't know what the fuck this meant either, but basically, Dow Jones is just a stock performance measurement, which tracks 30 large companies listed on the US stock exchange. The drop was so significant that in only 5 days, the market fell enough to completely erase the last 2 years of gains. Many companies are now expecting to generate zero earnings in the first quarter of this year, with investors worried that markets are shifting mostly on speculation of what could happen, as opposed to what is occurring in reality. This month saw the biggest fall of the Dow since the financial crisis of 2008. Almost every industry has been negatively affected by the outbreak, with some obvious exceptions. With this being said, the airline industry especially has taken a serious hit. With so many countries closing their borders and people being encouraged not to travel, it would stand to reason that ticket sales have been in a slump over the past month. However, some economists have predicted that most airlines could become completely bankrupt before the middle of the year. For governments around the world, who would usually want the ability to travel to be as accessible as possible, they may be left with difficult choices to make. The three main options are to let struggling airlines fail, give them enough money to avoid bankruptcy throughout the crisis, or to acquire the airlines completely and run them as a function of the government. As expected, many observers have been against the idea of governments bailing out airlines, especially when some have spent up to 96% of their free cash flow during the last decade buying back their own shares from investors, as opposed to reserving enough liquidity for such a dire occasion. To many of you who find this kind of business bullshit boring or unnecessarily complicated, this would be like a person spending 40 minutes in Age of Empires building nothing but farms before expecting their partner to bail them out when they eventually come under attack. What has been one of the most interesting aspects of the virus hasn't been anything related to health concerns, but rather the way in which it changes the lives of everyone around the globe. If the earth was an enormous stack of cards, consider this a thorough shuffling of the deck. One such example has been that Mexican authorities have closed their borders in an attempt to stop Americans from getting into the country. In Kangaroo Land, the usually extremely laid-back population has resorted to hoarding essential items such as pasta and toilet paper, with cases of physical fights occurring over the commodities, which are usually in abundance. As a result, most shopping centers throughout the country have employed full-time security contractors solely as a means to stop hoarding behavior, and limits on several items have been imposed in an attempt to keep up with the demand. The strangest part of this whole phenomenon is that there isn't the slightest indicator that there are shortages for any of these items. In a nationwide perfect demonstration of the prisoner's dilemma, the citizens of Australia have hoarded these products, not because there are shortages, but because of the mentality that, if they don't do so, then others will do the same. The top scientists on the SurSwag News team have concluded that if you're a hoarder during these difficult times, you're probably a piece of shit. Meanwhile, in the motherland, the UK government, in an attempt to keep citizens inside and away from work, has committed to business packages that will pay 80% of a worker's wage for the duration of the crisis. And while this has been praised by health experts attempting to stop the spread of corona, those with no such assistance have not enjoyed the luxury to stay at home. China, on the other hand, has reportedly seen a slowdown of the virus within the nation. However, with its history of misreporting, it is impossible to know for sure. At the same time, divorce rates across the Chinese mainland spiked during quarantine, and the only US senator who voted against an $8 billion deal to provide emergency funding tests positive for corona. The SurSwag News team would like to remind all viewers that listening to degenerate YouTube channels for serious medical advice is a terrible idea, but in general, try to stay inside, wash your hands, and don't touch your face. Now would also be an excellent time to catch up on that game you never finished, or to binge watch a YouTube channel you've always respected.
Wink wink.
In lighter news, the environmental impact of COVID-19 has been generally positive, with experts in the field suggesting that this may lead to the first decrease in global emissions since the financial crisis in 2008. There has so far been a 25% drop in energy use and emissions in China, a 50% decrease in carbon monoxide in New York, and the canals of Venice have turned uncharacteristically clear. As we've mentioned in previous episodes, it seems as if the biggest barrier to tackling climate change has been the lack of a well-defined evil face to punch, but these side effects have certainly given the world a taste of what could be achieved if governments are willing to act. Meanwhile, a blind man fails his citizenship test after being denied Braille, and a conference on coronavirus is cancelled due to coronavirus. In technology, while the world has been mostly occupied with the outbreak, a handful of US senators have proposed a bill that would likely be the most disruptive legal measure for the internet since the attempt to abolish net neutrality. What's being called the Earn It Act would hold companies liable for the actions of their users, meaning even a single case of illegal activity on their platform could lead to sizable fines. The intent is to hold companies like WhatsApp or Facebook responsible for cases of selling illegal substances or distributing illegal images. The argument for the bill is to make it much harder for criminals to operate online. However, this comes at a cost. As it currently stands, most platforms use a method called end-to-end encryption in order to preserve the privacy of their users. In simple terms, this means that only the sender and the receiver of a message knows what has been sent, with even the platform itself having no access to these communications. However, the Earn It Act would effectively require every single message or communication on a platform to be monitored in order to comply with its commitment to stop illegal activity. End-to-end encryption would be impossible, and with it, the ability of companies to shield its users from government organizations who wish to collect data from people of interest. This shit would be the equivalent of holding phone companies personally responsible for every single illegal deal made over a telephone. The implications of this bill are frankly terrifying to those who value their privacy online, but for the time being, there's an easy way to keep yourself anonymous. If you're under lockdown, or just don't want people knowing about your black market toilet paper business, then you'll probably want a VPN. Surfshark VPN will allow you to stay completely anonymous online by letting you appear in another country of your choosing. The security and privacy implications of online invisibility are of course easy to see. However, for most users, just being able to get access to region-locked Netflix shows is enough reason to want a VPN. This means no more getting cheated out of the critically acclaimed Spy Kids 3 on Netflix, or the entire Disney Plus platform, if you happen to be from this part of the world. Surfshark is cheaper than joking about my ex-wife, and allows an unlimited amount of people to use the same account, also like my ex-wife. Along with this, people who use the link in the description when signing up will also receive a revenue destroying 83% off, and an extra month free of cost. If this whole quarantine blows over in a month, and you no longer need to be anonymous, you can back out and keep your money in the first 30 days. Surfshark VPN. It's cheaper than the other ones. Meanwhile, Apple is fined $500 million for purposely making their older phones slower, followed by a further €1.1 billion for monopolistic practices. The country of Luxembourg has officially made all public transportation within the country entirely free. The move comes in an effort to reduce the amount of traffic, which has been notoriously bad, especially within the capital. The country, which is made up of a minuscule 2,600 square kilometers, had already been heavily subsidizing its public transit, with paid tickets only accounting for 8% of the operating costs, compared to close to 50% when looking at a nation such as the UK. The effective cost to the treasury of Luxembourg is therefore only around €40 million, but the average commuter is expected to save €100 per year. It's yet to be seen whether this system of free transit becomes an outright success story, as the country competes with the second highest rate of car ownership in the world, and a public transport system which is perceived as unexceptional by European standards. No matter the future, a country that is 9 times smaller than the largest cattle station in Australia is bound to be a perfect testing ground for other nations. At the same time, Tesla produces its millionth car. The tech industry is realizing that a shitload of people are perfectly capable of just working from home, and the Australian government is winding up to sue Facebook for up to $500 billion. The upcoming Olympic Games have been postponed by an entire year due to an unexpected lion infestation at the Olympic Village. Olympic Committee member with loving parents, Dick Pound, told USA Today that the postponement has been decided, and that due to the world effectively going to absolute shit, the Tokyo Games will have to wait until 2021. Mr. Pound cited the risk of injury, emotional well-being of athletes, and competition fairness to be key factors in the decision. The nations of Canada and Australia had already committed to pulling out of the event, while Russia had been previously banned due to bad behavior. In entertainment, social distancing practices have led to a rise in drive-in movie theaters. Participants of the Big Brother reality show were not told about the outbreak, and Sonic the Hedgehog becomes the highest grossing video game movie of all time. Meanwhile, the global film industry may lose a collective $5 billion due to the virus. The upcoming James Bond will be a staggering 163 minutes long, and the picture of that gamer duct taped to the ceiling is getting a documentary. Notable people who have contracted the virus this month include Idris Elba, Tom Hanks, Prince Charles, Boris Johnson, and the wife of the Canadian Prime Minister. In gaming, the specifications for both the PS5 and the Xbox Series X have been unveiled. Both consoles are confirmed to be launching with backwards compatibility for earlier consoles. Both come with 16GB of RAM, and both ship with solid-state drives for storage. Viewers who want to see more in-depth information can refer to the list of sources in the comment section, but in terms of raw performance, both consoles are being compared to a PC equipped with an RTX 2080 graphics card. It is currently unclear which company will win the upcoming generation's console war, but it's likely that the battle will be won outside of the hardware category. At the same time, GameStop tries to classify itself as an essential business. Nintendo continues its proud tradition of viciously defending its intellectual property, and Steam player numbers have hit their highest of all time. Many viewers will likely play games as an escape from the bullshit happening in real life, but even still, it seems that this industry cannot escape the effects of the real world. The Electronic Entertainment Expo, or E3, as it's commonly called, has officially been cancelled for 2020 due to coronavirus concerns. The expo, which has come to be known as the biggest gaming event in the world, was scheduled for June, and although many big names like Sony had previously not intended to attend, a huge list of names including Ubisoft, Xbox, Bethesda, and Capcom was scheduled for significant announcements. The cancellation has brought into question whether E3 may simply take place as a purely digital event, or whether the game companies themselves will avoid the often enormous attendance fees and use the money on more diversified advertising. If the event does indeed become fully digital, it may call into question whether a physical location is needed at all. Meanwhile, Naughty Dog developers are hospitalized after overworking. Horizon Zero Dawn is coming to PC, and GOG allows players the ability to refund their games a whole 30 days after purchase. This month also saw the launch of Call of Duty's free-to-play Battle Royale, Doom Eternal, Animal Crossing New Horizons, and the VR exclusive Half-Life Alyx. Announcement time. Viewers who have been around a while have probably seen a decrease in uploads this year, and even with hiring both an editor and a writer specifically to help with news videos, the outcome has just led to the projects becoming more ambitious as opposed to faster to produce. With the world the way it is, news is certainly more challenging to make, but our team will remain committed to keeping the series running as long as you as an audience continue to enjoy watching. As something special, the Politics Discord server has invited me for an AMA session on the 11th of April, in which anyone is welcome to join and ask anything that you might be interested in knowing. Links to my Discord server, Twitter, and Patreon are in the description if viewers don't wish to wait until then to ask me a question. I'd like to thank every viewer and Patreon supporter for making the series possible.